One crew member lies inside a torpor pod while cooling pads lower their body temperature, and medication keeps them deeply sedated. Their breathing slows, the monitors settle into a steady rhythm, and beside the pod another crew member remains awake, watching closely enough to notice if something begins to change. This is much closer to what human torpor would probably look like than the suspended animation of science fiction. The person is not frozen, and time has not stopped for their body. They are being kept in a carefully controlled medical state intended to reduce metabolism and lower some of the demands of a very long journey. For a voyage lasting decades, the attraction is obvious. If most passengers could spend long periods in torpor, they would need less food, less living space, and perhaps less day-to-day support while the ship crosses the enormous distance between stars. But torpor does not make those passengers maintenance-free. Someone still has to monitor their condition, respond if a drug produces an unexpected reaction, deal with an infection, or recognize when a sensor that appears normal is slowly becoming unreliable. Automated systems could handle much of that work, but a medical state maintained for months or years would still depend on equipment working correctly and on someone or something being able to intervene when it does not. And reducing the demands of the sleeping passengers does nothing to stop the spacecraft itself from aging. Life support equipment continues running, radiation continues reaching the hull, components continue wearing out, and small faults still have to be found before they become larger ones. Torpor may reduce some of what the passengers need, but the ship still has to survive every year of the journey. The longer people remain in torpor, the more important that difference becomes. Their bodies have to remain stable while fewer people may be awake to maintain the spacecraft around them, which means every failure that would normally be handled by a full crew may have to be recognized and solved by a much smaller one. That creates a difficult trade-off. The more people who sleep, the more the mission can reduce some of the demands associated with keeping them awake, but the more responsibility falls on the systems and people that remain active. A ship designed around torpor would therefore need more than reliable pods. It would need automation capable of watching over both the passengers and the spacecraft for years at a time, while still leaving someone able to step in when the machines encounter something they were not designed to handle. So torpor could make a long interstellar voyage easier in some important ways without solving the problem that makes the voyage so difficult in the first place. If humans can sleep through decades of the journey, the real question becomes who or what keeps the ship alive while they do. By the end of this video, you will understand what human torpor might realistically involve, how much it could reduce the demands of a long voyage, and why putting the passengers to sleep may simply move some of the hardest problems elsewhere. If you enjoy exploring questions like this with me, subscribing helps others find them too. Liking and sharing the video helps even more. Now, let's begin. The nearest star sounds close enough to belong on a map, especially when almost every other star is described as much farther away. Proxima Centauri is our closest stellar neighbor, yet that friendly word, closest, starts to lose its comfort as soon as distance becomes travel time. The European Space Agency places Proxima about 4.22 light-years from Earth. A light-year is the distance light covers in 1 year, about 5.88 trillion miles, or 9.461 trillion kilometers. Multiply that by 4.22, and a one-way route comes to roughly 24.8 trillion miles, or 40 trillion kilometers. Those numbers are hard to hold in your head, so it helps to give the spacecraft a speed. Suppose it could cruise at 100,000 miles per hour, about 161,000 kilometers per hour. That is far faster than any passenger vehicle and faster than most machines you will ever see moving. Even then, the trip would take close to 28,000 years. Make the craft 10 times faster, and you haven't made the trip short. You have brought it down to roughly 2,800 years. Make it 100 times faster than our first example, an extraordinary 10 million miles per hour, or about 16 million kilometers per hour. And Proxima is still nearly 280 years away. Several generations could be born and die before arrival. This is what distance does before biology gets any say. It sets the first mission clock. The crew's bodies, minds, food, air, and machines would all have to answer to that clock, but none of them can shorten the route simply by being better designed. Torpor might reduce what awake passengers need during a long crossing. It cannot turn 40 trillion kilometers into a trip that fits inside one human life. And this scale alone tells us nothing about whether a crewed spacecraft could survive the crossing. We haven't counted radiation, repairs, fuel, or the slow wear of closed systems. No crewed craft today is known to be capable of making such a voyage. We have only drawn the line from Earth to Proxima and let speed divide into distance. The result is calm arithmetic with an awkward human consequence. Before anyone sleeps, the mission may already last longer than everyone who launched it, perhaps longer than the culture that built it. If distance sets the clock, what kind of spacecraft could keep human lives going while centuries pass outside? A very fast starship can make the sleeping passengers seem like the difficult part. So let's be unusually generous to the ship and give it a cruise speed of 1/10 the speed of light, or about 18,600 miles per second. That's nearly 30,000 kilometers per second. At that speed, the moon would pass behind you in about 13 seconds. No crewed spacecraft can do this. We don't have such a vehicle waiting on a launch pad, and this number isn't a forecast of what engineers will soon achieve. It is a thought experiment designed to give the idea every possible advantage. Propulsion receives an enormous gift before the passengers are asked to solve anything at all. Now let distance divide by speed. Proxima Centauri is about 4.22 light-years away, so a spacecraft coasting at 1/10 of light speed would need about 42.2 years to reach it. That's 42.2 years before we add the time needed to accelerate at the beginning or slow down near the destination. It also assumes the ship can hold that extreme cruise speed throughout the long middle of the trip. You can see the human cost on a simple mission timeline. Mark 1 year, then another, and keep going until 42 annual marks sit between departure and arrival. A baby born as the ship left Earth would be entering middle age when it reached Proxima. An adult crew member could give the mission most of a working lifetime and still have no quick route home. Even messages would take years to cross the growing distance, so Earth could never feel close in the way a distant control room does. This is the charitable version. We have granted the spacecraft a speed far beyond demonstrated crewed travel, ignored the extra time around the cruise, and still failed to turn the crossing into a season, a long holiday, or even a conventional career. The trip remains a large part of a human life. That changes where torpor belongs in the problem. Sleeping through the voyage doesn't make the stars closer, and it doesn't supply the engine. It becomes relevant only after propulsion has already crossed a brutal threshold and left us with a mission lasting more than 4 decades. Torpor is a downstream answer to the time created by distance and speed, not the first breakthrough that makes interstellar travel possible. If 1/10 of light speed is already a generous gift rather than a working crude technology, what happens to that timeline when we replace it with propulsion we might actually build? Once a voyage takes decades, the human body begins to look like the untidy part of a technical plan. The ship may have a course, an engine, and a date of arrival, but the people inside it still have to live through every day in between. They wake, eat, worry, argue, grow older, and watch the mission calendar lose another square. That is why the sleeping passenger idea keeps returning. Its appeal isn't hard to understand. If the crew could remain unconscious for most of the crossing, then 40 years on paper might feel like a departure followed by an arrival. The distance would remain unchanged, yet the waiting could seem to vanish from human experience. And waiting is no small burden. A crew awake for decades would face boredom without escape, fear without quick answers, and conflict with the same few people inside the same sealed machine. Children might be born into a mission they never chose. Parents could die before reaching the destination. Even a successful voyage would consume careers, friendships, birthdays, and much of a lifetime. There would be no weekend away from the ship, no fresh group of people to meet, and no flight home when confinement became too much. Torpor offers a seductive edit. Take that long mission calendar and cross out most of the conscious days. No restless year 12. No strained dinner in year 26. No mourning when someone realizes that Earth has become a place remembered more clearly than it can ever be seen again. You leave, awareness fades, and much later you wake near another star. It is easy to understand why that image survives. People aren't only trying to beat the clock, they are trying to avoid feeling each slow turn of it, especially when the destination may lie beyond the healthy working life of everyone who leaves Earth. Sleep appears to replace endurance with absence. But nothing physical has been erased. The ship still travels every mile, because distance and cruise speed set the schedule before biology enters the plan. Its systems still have to work while the crew cannot help, and time continues through every sleeping body. Torpor doesn't create speed, reduce distance, or invent a ship capable of the crossing. It changes the experience of a timeline that propulsion has already imposed. That distinction is easy to lose because sleep feels like an answer to the whole voyage. It is really an answer to one human cost, staying awake while a machine crosses an inhuman span. We should respect that appeal. Nobody is foolish for preferring absence to 40 years of confinement, uncertainty, and watching life slip past through a calendar. When engineers begin counting kilograms, power, food, equipment, and crew time, what problem does torpor actually solve? Torpor can sound like an idea that wandered out of a movie and into an engineering meeting. Serious planners keep studying it, though, because an awake crew shapes much of the spacecraft around them. People need a place where they can remain capable through months of confinement. Daily life takes room, whether someone is eating, exercising, or trying to rest, and every extra part of that living space adds mass. NASA-funded work by SpaceWorks examined that problem for Mars missions carrying 4 to 6 people. The study looked at transit periods of roughly 360 to 400 days, or about a year. For missions of that kind, a typical habitat in space could weigh roughly 20 to 50 metric tons. That's about 22 to 55 US tons. The crew compartment isn't a few bunks behind the engines. It can be one of the ship's largest systems. So reducing awake time gets an engineer's attention. If the crew spends much of the crossing in torpor, the ship may need less active living space and fewer supplies for daily use. Some equipment might shrink along with them. The savings won't cover everything, since sleeping people still need a safe environment and constant care. But cutting even part of the load could change the design of the mission. Awake time also carries a human cost. The Mars 500 experiment kept 6 men inside a mock spacecraft near Moscow for 520 days. Researchers followed how isolation and a fixed routine affected their sleep, mood, and ability to live together. Mars 500 wasn't a real flight. It couldn't reproduce weightlessness or radiation, so its results have limits. Even so, it helped show why crew psychology belongs in mission planning. Someone awake for the whole crossing must stay healthy and cooperative while living beside the same few people, inside the same enclosed space, month after month. Torpor offers a possible way to shorten that lived confinement, even when it can't shorten the trip. That is the strongest fair case for studying it. Torpor aims at costs Mars planners already face. The habitat and its supply chain grow around an awaked crew, while prolonged isolation consumes time and tests the people living through it. Engineers aren't preserving the idea just because fiction made it familiar. They're testing whether less waking life in transit could lower a very real mission bill. A funded study proves interest, not readiness. It doesn't show that torpor is safe, or that any savings will exceed the systems required to maintain it. So what would have to happen inside a human body for those proposed savings to become real? The promised savings can sound strangely vague, as though putting a crew into torpor simply turns down the cost of everything at once. It doesn't. The idea becomes more concrete when you look at an awake person's day. The cabin must support each breath and each meal, then deal with what the body leaves behind. It must also give a small group enough private space to keep from wearing each other down. Now compare 2 habitats carrying the same crew. In one, everyone stays awake for the whole voyage, so the ship supports continuous activity and provides enough shared room for daily life. In the other, Several people spend much of the trip in torpor pods. They still need protection and medical care, but many waking routines stop while they sleep. They are no longer eating meals, exercising, or using a washroom, which leaves the awake crew with fewer daily needs to manage. That difference reaches beyond comfort, because fewer active people can mean less habitable volume and lower demand for some consumables. With fewer hours spent organizing daily life, the walls can move inward, stores may shrink as well, while some equipment serves the smaller waking group instead of the full crew at once. Fewer people would also share the confined rooms each day, changing the social load. One Torpor study compared its designs with a NASA reference habitat called Trans-Hab. Its models reported habitat mass reductions of up to about 52%. The same study estimated that the total mass needed in low Earth orbit before departure, known as IMLEO, could fall by roughly 25 to 38%. Those percentages are study outputs, not results from a spacecraft that has flown. They depend on the mission design, the length of torpor, the number of crew members asleep, and the equipment required to keep them safe. A pod must monitor the sleeper, control temperature, survive a power failure, and allow emergency access, so it is not weightless. Shrinking the crew cabin also leaves the rest of the ship in place, including its engines and radiation protection, because the mission still needs navigation and reserves. Still, these models explain why engineers keep returning to torpor. The proposal isn't merely that the passengers would notice less boredom. Awake human life expands the habitat and consumes supplies, while the people and equipment supporting that life also demand attention. All of it must be launched from Earth. Compress enough waking time, and some of that burden may be compressed with it. But before anyone can claim those savings, the sleeping body has to cooperate. What would torpor need to change inside a person, and how could doctors keep that change from becoming an injury? Once you start counting the savings, it's easy to let the whole ship shrink in your mind. A crew that spends less time awake consumes fewer meals and may need less shared room. It also passes fewer hours in active life, with all the light, conversation, exercise, and conflict those hours bring. Those are real costs, and reducing them could change the design enough to make torpor worth studying. But torpor compresses one layer of the mission. It doesn't delete the mission underneath. You can see the distinction in a smaller crew module placed inside the rest of the ship. The living space may contract, while the ship around it still has to move fluids, find its way, and protect the crew. The destination hasn't moved closer. The ship still has to survive the full crossing, keep its systems running, and carry whatever is needed when the crew wakes. The human savings are still important. Awake people draw on supplies and leave waste behind. They need room to move, and they may spend years dealing with one another in a confined place. Boredom and interpersonal strain aren't minor comforts on a very long voyage. They can affect judgment, cooperation, and whether people follow the routines keeping everyone alive. If torpor shortens the lived experience of the trip, some of that behavioral burden falls away. Yet the burden doesn't simply disappear. It changes form. A passenger who isn't awake to feel bored also isn't awake to hear a pump making the wrong sound. Fewer active crew members may mean less conflict, but it can also mean fewer people available to spot a fault, improvise a repair, or care for someone whose pod is behaving badly. The mission becomes more dependent on medical support, automatic controls, backup power, and equipment that may need to work for years without much help. That trade is the accounting rule to keep in mind. Torpor may reduce habitat mass and awake crew time, easing the daily work of keeping people occupied and cooperative. In return, it places more weight on the systems surrounding them. A compressed mission can still fail, and it may become less forgiving when most of the people who could respond are unavailable. So the attraction is neither fantasy nor a free reduction in scale. Engineers keep studying torpor because the savings could be substantial, even after the supporting equipment is included. The claim is narrower. Reduce wakeful living, and you may reduce part of what must travel between stars. Whether that exchange works depends on something the ship's floor plan cannot answer. What kind of torpor can human medicine actually produce? The word hibernation makes the whole plan sound almost comfortable. The crew settles into a deeper kind of sleep. The ship crosses the dark, and everyone wakes when the trip is over. But medical researchers use several names for these states because they are not the same thing. None of them is just a longer night in bed. Natural hibernation is something some animals enter through their own biology. We don't know how to make a human body do that on command. Therapeutic hypothermia is different. Doctors lower a patient's temperature while closely watching and managing the rest of their care. Sedation may be part of that process, but sedation alone is not torpor. It can make a person unconscious without causing the wider fall in metabolism that a space mission would need. A review published in Frontiers uses terms such as quasi-torpor and synthetic torpor for a reason. Quasi-torpor means trying to produce some parts of animal torpor with medical tools we already know, mainly cooling and sedation. Synthetic torpor means a state caused by medical treatment rather than a natural ability of the human body. The names can sound a little fussy, yet they stop several very different claims from hiding inside one appealing word. The limits are right there in the language. Researchers are not saying that human hibernation already works and only needs to last longer. They are talking about a controlled medical state built from procedures that need close support. A person may seem to be sleeping, but the scene is much closer to critical care. Suspended animation belongs in another box. That is the idea that nearly all activity in the body could stop while someone waits safely for decades or even centuries. Cryonics is separate as well. It preserves a body at very low temperatures after legal death, in the hope that future tools might succeed where current medicine cannot. Neither is simply a stronger setting for cooling and sedation. These labels do not prove that doctors can keep anyone in torpor for an interstellar trip. They only define the limited claim now being studied. That may sound like a small gain, but it keeps us from judging a medical proposal as if it were a machine from fiction. Take away the enchanted sleep, and the crew member in the pod looks more like a patient. Their state has to be created, watched, supported, and later reversed. So what happens to a human body when that managed state lasts far beyond anything medicine has tried? Once the crew is unconscious, the pod can look like a sealed box that does the work by itself. Close the lid, lower the lights, and let the ship carry its sleeping passenger. Current quasi-torpor research points towards something far more active. The words researchers use give the game away. They talk about extended sleep, mild cooling, sedation, monitoring, and supportive care. Each term describes a condition that medicine must create and maintain. None describes a natural switch inside the body that can simply be turned off for a few months. A crew member in this state would still need drugs delivered at the right rate. Pumps would have to keep running, lines would have to stay clear, and sensors would watch temperature, breathing, blood pressure, and other signs that the body was tolerating the treatment. If breathing weakened, the pod might need airway support. Nutrition would still have to enter somehow, and waste would still have to leave. You can see why the capsule begins to change shape in your mind. It is no longer just a bed with a clever lid. It looks more like a compact intensive care room, with drip lines, temperature readouts, pump controls, and alarms surrounding a person who cannot report pain, nausea, confusion, or a loose tube. That comparison has limits. Today's equipment does not dictate the exact hardware of a future spacecraft, and better automation could remove much of the hands-on work. The point is the management logic. A reversible medical exception remains safe only while several conditions stay within narrow limits, and the ship must keep those conditions in step for the entire treatment. The pod is almost a room-sized medical sentence. Drug delivery, cooling, breathing support, fluid balance, nutrition, waste handling, and monitoring all have to remain grammatically correct. One misplaced part can change the meaning of everything around it. This creates an awkward reversal. Torpor is supposed to reduce the demands of carrying an awake crew, yet the ship inherits a continuous medical duty in exchange. The people may stop working, but their support system cannot. It must notice small changes, decide whether they are dangerous, correct them, and know when the planned state has begun to fail. Perhaps future pods will make that choreography compact and dependable. For now, the language of quasi-torpor tells us where the science stands, not at a pause button, but at a carefully maintained medical condition. And if that condition must continue far beyond any hospital treatment attempted today, how would a spacecraft know when to keep managing it and when to wake the patient? Once torpor begins to sound medically complicated, a colder version can seem like the obvious escape. Cool the body much further, stop nearly all activity, and leave less biology running long enough to go wrong. That sounds like torpor turned up to its strongest setting. It isn't. The words used by researchers mark a real medical boundary. Therapeutic hypothermia, controlled cooling, and experimental torpor all describe living patients whose condition is actively managed. The body is slowed, but its tissues remain alive, its chemistry continues, and clinicians expect to bring the patient back using methods connected to present-day medicine. Even the cautious labels tell you this is a treatment, not storage. Cryopreservation makes a different claim. It takes the body into a state where ice formation, chemical stress, and damage during cooling and warming become major problems of their own. Preventing large ice crystals with protective chemicals may reduce one kind of harm, but those chemicals can also be toxic. Getting them through an entire human body without uneven cooling or injury is also far harder than preserving a small sample. You haven't merely slowed the same process, you've added a future repair problem before revival can even begin. That distinction is easy to blur because both ideas involve cold and an absent patient. Yet the image on each side of the line is clearly very different. On one side, a sedated person is cooled while machines track the living body and doctors plan a return. On the other, a whole body has been preserved after legal death in the hope that later technology might repair the damage, reverse the cause of death, and restore the person. No whole cryopreserved human has been revived. Current cryonics reviews do not offer a demonstrated medical path for doing it. And none of this proves that future cryobiology can never cross that line. Better protective chemicals, cooling methods, tissue repair, or other tools may change what can be preserved and recovered, but a possible future result is not present evidence, and calling cryonics deeper torpor borrows confidence from medicine that has not achieved the harder task. So the stronger sounding option does not rescue the case for long human torpor. It changes the proposal into a much larger gamble involving preservation, repair, and revival. Once we return to torpor as it actually exists, a managed state in a living patient, how much evidence do we have that it can last for the duration a spacecraft would need? Hospitals can sometimes keep a patient cooled for days, so it's tempting to treat duration as a problem that medicine has nearly solved. If 14 days are possible, perhaps a month just needs better equipment, and a year needs a sturdier version of the same system. That sounds reasonable until you place the dates on a calendar. A SpaceWorks mission study cited cases of prolonged hypothermia-style care lasting as long as 14 days. 14 days of managing a cooled human body is a serious medical achievement. It means doctors can reduce temperature, support vital functions, watch for complications, and sometimes maintain that state far beyond the length of an operation. Doing this safely requires constant attention to changes that can become dangerous while the patient is unable to respond in the usual way. The frontier is measured in days, not minutes. But that evidence comes from critical care. These patients aren't healthy travelers following a tested spaceflight routine. They're being treated because something has gone badly wrong, inside hospitals filled with trained staff, monitoring equipment, drugs, and immediate ways to intervene. Their care shows that a human body can sometimes be supported under prolonged cooling. It does not establish a durable torpor protocol for a mission. The newer research language makes the limit even clearer. Reviews of human quasi-torpor programs discuss targets around 24 hours to 5 days. Those windows could still be valuable. Even a single day of reduced metabolic demand might teach researchers how temperature, sleep, circulation, and immune activity shift together. 5 days could reveal problems that never appear in a short laboratory session. The savings are modest as well. Current studies look for partial reductions in energy use, not a body brought close to a complete pause. That difference is important on a spacecraft, where every person still needs oxygen, water, waste handling, temperature control, and medical supervision. Lowering those needs by a percentage could improve a mission design. It doesn't erase them. Now put 14 circled days beside an interstellar voyage that may last decades. The medical achievement remains exactly as impressive as it was, but the scale changes. 14 days would cover only a thin mark at the start of that calendar. Almost every page after it would still be blank. That isn't a reason to dismiss the work. Day-scale human cooling is real, difficult, and worth developing. It's simply much closer to a clinical foothold than to a transport system for the stars. And if staying under for decades is far beyond present evidence, what would repeated cooling and waking do to the traveler along the way? Once torpor seems possible, it's tempting to let the sleeping body fade almost to zero. The person lies still, the cabin gets cooler, and the supply bars seem as if they should sink toward nothing. Current research gives us a less dramatic result. The bars fall, but they stop much sooner than imagination wants. One review of quasi-torpor modeled the daily cost by combining two simple things: how much of the day a crew member spends asleep, and how much energy the body uses while resting. Extending the share of the day spent asleep produced a modeled saving of about 20%. Pairing that longer sleep with a further 20% drop in resting metabolism raised the modeled saving to roughly 30%. So begin with a bar at 100. Longer sleep lowers it to about 80. Add the reduced resting rate and it reaches roughly 70. That is a real reduction, especially when every kilogram of food, water, and oxygen has to leave Earth aboard a rocket. But the bar never approaches zero. Even under the more favorable model, most of the daily demand remains. Small cooling experiments point in the same direction. In sedated volunteers, oxygen consumption fell by about 5.2% for each 1 degree Celsius of cooling, each 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. The change can be measured and it moves the right way, but it arrives one step at a time. Cooling someone by a few degrees doesn't switch metabolism off, it trims it. There's a slightly awkward human truth in that number. We can hear torpor and imagine a biological pause button, while the evidence offers something closer to a reduced rate on the body's running costs. A Mars mission might still care very much about that reduction. Saving even a fraction of food and oxygen across months could change storage needs, launch mass, and the room available for other systems. Yet these percentages come from bounded experiments and models, not from crews who have crossed space in torpor. They show what might be gained under stated assumptions. They don't show that a whole mission can hold those gains safely, or that the same body can repeat the process again and again. Torpor, at this stage, looks less like an escape from human needs and more like a discount on them. If the traveler still uses roughly 70% of the resources, what happens when the voyage lasts far longer than any supply plan can comfortably cover? The tempting answer is to stretch the timer. If a body can remain in torpor for several days, perhaps better drugs and better monitoring could extend that state to months, then years, and eventually the decades an interstellar trip might require. But duration is not the only missing piece. The whole process has to remain safe while it runs, end safely, and leave the traveler able to do it again. That sounds like one engineering problem, but it bundles several different kinds of success into the same promise. The evidence we have sits on a very small island. Clinical cooling and medically induced states can protect patients during short, controlled periods, while mission studies suggest that partial metabolic reductions could trim food, oxygen, and living space. Those findings have value. They're simply far from total suspension, and farther still from keeping a healthy crew protected across a voyage that might outlast everyone who launched it. Moving from days to decades changes the kind of problem you're solving. A longer protocol gives infections, blood clots, muscle loss, equipment faults, and small dosing errors more time to accumulate. Even if each risk stays low on any single day, it must remain low across thousands of days with no hospital nearby and perhaps no conscious doctor available to intervene. Then comes the return. Lowering metabolism is only part of the job. The crew must warm safely, regain awareness, recover strength, and perform difficult work in an unfamiliar place. A traveler who wakes alive but cannot think clearly, stand, repair machinery, or respond to an emergency hasn't been protected in the way the mission requires. And one successful cycle may not be enough. A crew might need to wake for maintenance, shelter from a fault, or change course, then enter torpor again. Each passage down and back up would have to be dependable. Medicine has not shown that healthy humans can repeat such cycles across years without mounting harm. None of this proves the bridge can't be built. A smaller gain on a Mars mission could still be worthwhile, even if the crew sleeps for limited periods and saves only part of its supplies. But interstellar travel asks for several advances hidden inside one calm phrase: long torpor. It asks for safe duration, safe return, repeated use, and a capable person at the end. Once those demands are separated, the unbuilt distance becomes easier to see. And before anyone tries to cross it, what would that long stillness do to the human body? A sleeping body can look preserved because nothing seems to be happening. Breathing slows, the limbs stay still, and the person appears to be waiting safely for the journey to pass. If metabolism has been reduced as well, it's tempting to think bone loss would slow down with everything else. But bone is not a fixed frame tucked beneath the skin. It is living tissue, always being removed and rebuilt in response to the loads placed on it. On Earth, walking across a room, standing at a counter, or climbing a flight of stairs gives the skeleton a reason to maintain itself. Take those loads away, and the rebuilding process no longer keeps pace in the same way. That happens whether the passenger notices it or not. In microgravity, bones no longer carry the body's weight, while months of deep inactivity would remove another source of strain. Torpor may lower the body's energy use, but it could also deepen the very stillness that drives skeletal decline. A review in the journal NPJ Microgravity gathered evidence from long-duration spaceflight and unloading studies. Without strong countermeasures, astronauts can lose about 1 to 1.5% of bone each month at the spine and hip. In the spongy inner structure of the hip, called trabecular bone, losses can reach roughly 2 to 2.7% per month. That inner structure helps distribute forces through the joint. You can think of it like the crossed supports inside a bridge. The outside may still hold its shape, while the fine framework within grows thinner. A scan taken month after month could show that framework fading even as the sleeper looks unchanged. The damage would be active, though outwardly almost invisible. The rates do not come from completed human torpor missions. No such mission has happened. They come from people living in microgravity and from studies that reproduce parts of prolonged unloading, so they cannot tell us exactly how cooling, reduced metabolism, drugs, and extreme duration would combine. Torpor might alter the rate. It also make exercise and other countermeasures much harder to provide. Stillness, then, is not neutral. The skeleton adapts away from the demands that landing, standing, repair work, and emergency movement will later place upon it. A passenger could wake with consciousness restored and still lack the internal structure needed to move safely. And bone is only one tissue that responds to being unused. If the skeleton thins while the sleeper feels nothing, what happens to the muscles meant to pull on it? Bone density can feel like a number you can deal with later. Wake the crew, give them food and exercise, and let recovery begin. But the ship may ask for strength before anyone has time to recover. A crew member coming out of torpor might need to rise from a couch, pull on a suit, brace against a sudden turn, or carry a damaged part across the cabin. If an alarm sounds, the body doesn't get a gentle week to remember its job. It has to produce force that day, perhaps within minutes of waking. That's why muscle and bone loss can't be treated as separate medical charts. Your hip works more like a loaded support than a loose collection of tissue. Muscles pull across the joint, bone carries the force, and both adjust to the loads they receive. Remove those loads for long enough, and the whole working system grows weaker. A scan may show a modest change, while the ability to stand, lift, or absorb a hard landing has fallen further than the clean number suggests. Finite element studies using data from crews aboard the International Space Station have tried to estimate this loss of hip strength, not just changes in bone density. Their average estimates were roughly 2.4 to 2.7% per month, though the results varied significantly from one person to another. That variation is important. It means we can't say every sleeper would wake with the same weakness, or that a particular loss would follow a simple monthly line across a voyage lasting years. Still, the average gives us a warning about function. Several months of unloading can leave a hip less able to withstand the forces it once handled. Torpor may reduce metabolism and save food, water, and cabin resources, yet it could also deepen the stillness causing the damage. A sleeping crew cannot easily perform the daily resistance exercise astronauts use to push back against deconditioning. Now place that weaker body at the end of the trip. The crew member wakes, swings their feet down, and tries to stand while the ship is preparing to land. Another person must reach a valve above shoulder height. Someone else has to hold a tool steady as the cabin shakes. These aren't athletic goals. They're basic pieces of keeping a mission alive. Recovery may be possible, and different bodies will respond differently. The timing is the problem. Strength that returns after weeks of training cannot help during an alarm on the first morning. So if Torpor delivers awake minds inside bodies that aren't ready to work, what would a spacecraft have to do before the crew could safely take control? The pod offers one tempting escape from this problem. Perhaps a body in torpor isn't simply lying still. Metabolism slows, temperature may fall, and the body enters a state we don't experience during sleep. If those changes also protect muscle and bone, then evidence from bed rest or critical care might seem like the wrong comparison. That protection is possible, but it hasn't been shown in humans. Studies of prolonged bed rest show what happens when healthy bodies stop carrying their usual weight. Muscles shrink, bones lose minerals, and the systems that control balance and blood pressure begin adapting to life without standing. Evidence from intensive care points in the same direction under harsher conditions. Long periods of immobility can leave people profoundly weak, even after treatment has kept them alive and their illness has begun to improve. Those two bodies of evidence don't tell us exactly what torpor will do. They tell us why stillness can't be dismissed. A person in a pod wouldn't merely be resting after a long day. Torpor would deliberately extend the time spent barely moving, so it could increase the same unloading that drives loss during bed rest and critical care. The pod removes movement by design. Slowing metabolism doesn't automatically switch that process off. Natural hibernators do have ways to limit the damage. That is why bears and other animals are so appealing to researchers, yet we don't know whether induced human torpor would bring any comparable package of protection. Cooling a person and reducing metabolic demand may create some features of hibernation without creating the biological controls that preserve a hibernator's tissues. A slower body isn't necessarily a protected one. The exact human torpor state remains unknown. It might resemble prolonged bed rest with a lower metabolic rate. It might share some features with care in an intensive care unit where immobility, drugs, inflammation, and nutrition all affect recovery. Or future methods might trigger protective responses closer to those seen in true hibernation. At present, choosing the last possibility would mean assuming the best result before human evidence exists. We can hope for that protection, but we can't build a crew's survival around it yet. That leaves a rather awkward fact inside the calmest-looking part of the spacecraft. The closed pod may appear to be doing almost nothing, while the body inside is changing hour by hour. Torpor doesn't remove the problem of stillness. It may increase that stillness and hold it for months. Rest is not the same thing as preservation. If animals can remain inactive for months and emerge able to move, what do bears actually prove about protecting a human body? Bears make the hopeful case for torpor better than any spacecraft concept ever could. A bear can spend months in a den, barely moving, then emerge in spring with its muscles and bones in remarkably good condition. If a human stayed that still for that long, we would expect weakness, tissue loss, and a difficult return to movement. The bear gets up and walks away. That deserves our respect. Studies of bear hibernation have found a deep fall in energy use without the body cooling anywhere near as much as it does in many smaller hibernators. The quasi-torpor review notes that a bear's metabolism can fall by as much as about 75%, while its body temperature drops only modestly. It isn't simply becoming cold enough for chemistry to slow down. Its whole body shifts into a protected state. Muscle proteins are managed differently. Bone loss is held back. Stored fat supplies energy, while the bear avoids many of the harms that prolonged bed rest would cause in us. Other hibernating animals add their own variations, protecting organs and controlling inflammation through changes built into their biology. Nature has, in several forms, produced something close to the result a long mission would want: a large cut in energy use, months of inactivity, and a body that can recover. You can see why this feels like an answer. The animal is warm enough to survive, still enough to conserve energy, and protected enough to wake without the damage we would predict. At first, human torpor can seem less like a medical gamble and more like a copy waiting to be made. But the copy is the difficult part. A bear doesn't turn down one control and hope the rest of its body follows. Metabolic suppression arrives with a linked set of protections shaped across evolution. The tissues alter how they use fuel, preserve structure, handle waste, and respond to stress. Humans don't yet know how to call up that complete package on demand, keep it stable for months, and reverse it safely at a chosen time. So bears don't prove that human torpor is ready. They prove that profound metabolic slowing can exist alongside strong tissue protection, which is far more encouraging than a theory drawn on paper. They also show how high the standard must be. Lowering energy use is only part of the achievement. The body must be actively defended while that happens. If evolution built those defenses into hibernators, how much of that protection could medicine reproduce in us? It's tempting to think the missing step is a switch. Bears are mammals, we're mammals, and their bodies already know how to slow down without coming apart. Somewhere inside human biology, perhaps the same old machinery is waiting for the right signal. But a hibernating bear isn't using one switch. It's running a whole set of protections at once, and many of them are still not understood well enough to separate copy and control. The bear doesn't merely lower its metabolism and hope for the best. Its muscles resist wasting. Its bones hold on to their strength. Blood keeps moving without the usual trouble caused by long periods of stillness. The brain, organs, immune system, and cells all pass through the cycle together. That togetherness is the problem. Engineers like parts that can be tested one at a time. If a pump fails, you replace the pump. If a sensor gives bad readings, you test another sensor. Natural torpor doesn't arrive as a box of labeled parts. Its protections overlap, depend on one another, and change as the animal enters, remains in, and leaves the slowed state. Pulling out one helpful response may do little without the rest, or may create a new risk somewhere else. So the bear has the full kit, while our side of the workbench still has blank spaces. We don't have a proven control marked preserve muscle, another marked protect circulation, and one final control that restores clear thinking at the selected hour. More important, we don't know whether those jobs can be divided that cleanly at all. Researchers can still learn a great deal from hibernators. A pathway that limits muscle loss might lead to a treatment for patients confined to bed. A clue about bone maintenance could help astronauts even if deep torpor remains out of reach. Protection against cell stress may become one piece of a much larger medical system. None of that is small. It simply isn't the same as permission to place a healthy person into months of metabolic suppression and expect the entire body to return on schedule. The animal analogy succeeds then by showing us the size and shape of what's missing. It offers evidence that mammalian tissues can survive conditions that would normally cause serious damage, but it doesn't hand us a deployable method. Humans may borrow pieces of that package. We do not possess the package today. And if biology hasn't yet supplied a complete human kit, what would a real mission have to build around that absence? It's tempting to think occasional waking might close the gap. If a crew could sleep for weeks or months, then wake long enough to eat, move, check the ship, and receive medical care, perhaps the imperfect parts could be repaired before everyone went back into their pods. But that idea gives each wake window a very heavy job. A bear doesn't simply sleep for a long time and then depend on a brief hospital visit to reverse the damage. Its whole body has evolved around the cycle. A human crew would be using medical control to imitate only parts of that protection, so opening the pod would bring them back into human weakness, not bear-like resilience. Blood pressure would have to settle as the person became active again. Muscles that had done little work would need to support movement. Balance, attention, and judgment would have to return well enough for someone to handle equipment and respond to trouble. None of this means every awakening would become a crisis. It means waking couldn't be treated as a casual maintenance stop. That changes how we use the animal comparison. Hibernators show that a mammal can pass through long periods of low activity without paying every cost we would expect. They reveal the kind of protection a working system would need. They don't prove that humans can borrow one part, schedule a monthly wake-up, and leave the rest to routine care. In fact, the closer you look at the shortcut, the more research it creates. Which protections must remain active during suppression? Which losses can be repaired afterward? How quickly can the brain become dependable again? And how much medical support would that return require? Nature gives us clues, but it doesn't give us authorization. A pod opening after several months would therefore look less like someone rising from a good night's sleep and more like a small arrival event. The crew member would need time, observation, physical recovery, food, fluids, and a careful return to useful work. Then, before the next sleep period, the mission would have to decide whether that person was truly ready to repeat the cycle. Periodic waking may still be part of a workable design. It might reduce some risks, spread medical checks across the voyage, and give the crew brief chances to manage problems that machines cannot. But each wake would carry the circulatory, mental, and operational burdens the pod had only postponed. So can waking be made routine, safe, and useful enough to happen again and again across a long voyage? Periodic wake-ups sound like a sensible compromise. Instead of keeping everyone alert for the whole voyage, the ship could revive one crew member at a time for inspections, repairs, or course changes. You might expect the process to work like opening a laptop. The system comes back online, the task gets done, and sleep resumes. A human body does not wake that way after prolonged sedation and unloading. Blood has to move through the body under changed conditions, the heart has to adjust, and muscles that have done little work must support movement again. Even in low gravity, the crew member still has to control posture, handle equipment, and avoid drifting into a wall while confused or weak. Simply opening their eyes does not make them ready for work. NASA studies of human performance after unloading treat deconditioning and orthostatic intolerance as serious return to function risks. Orthostatic intolerance means the circulatory system struggles when a person tries to stand after long periods without normal gravity or weight-bearing activity. Blood pressure can fall, leaving a person dizzy or nauseated. Vision may blur before the person faints. Strength, coordination, and clear thinking may return on different schedules, which leaves the ship with a difficult test. Awake is easy to confirm, but capable is harder. The exact effects inside a torpor system remain uncertain. A future system might shorten recovery, support circulation, or help preserve muscle. Still, the timing of the risk is hard to avoid because it appears during the return to action when the mission has started depending on that person again. That turns each wake into something closer to an arrival than an alarm clock. A crew member may open their eyes inside a moving ship, surrounded by equipment that expects decisions, while their sense of place, balance, and time is still catching up. They may need to read displays and remember procedures while judging whether a sound is harmless. Even deciding whether a warning can wait requires clear thought. None of that becomes easier because the body has technically awakened. The ship may also choose the worst possible time. A wake cycle planned for maintenance could overlap with a navigation alert, a coolant leak, or a communication failure. The person assigned to respond might be at their weakest just as the mission asks for careful movement and clear judgment. That does not mean every wake ends badly. It means every wake has consequences, even when recovery goes as planned. Torpor does not erase care labour. It shifts much of that work into repeated transitions, where monitoring, fluids, food, physical recovery and judgment have to arrive together. Someone must watch the waking crew member, decide when they can work safely, and remain available if the return goes poorly. If those transitions consume enough time, supplies and crew attention, some of the system's gains may disappear with them. And if waking is a landing into your own body, who stays awake long enough to guide everyone else down? The person helping you wake would not be standing beside a smooth, sealed pod with nothing to do but check a screen. Behind that clean shell, medical tubing and support equipment would connect the sleeping passenger to the spacecraft. Each connection would have to stay clean and receive regular inspection. Some would eventually need replacement or disposal. Software can watch pressure, flow and temperature, but it cannot make the hardware harmless. A line can bend or clog, and a worn seal can leak. A catheter may irritate tissue or give bacteria a path into the body. Food must arrive at the right rate while waste leaves safely. If a device sounds an alarm, someone may still have to open the pod and examine the person. Reviews of proposed quasi-torpor systems already include recurring demands around breathing and nutrition, with intravenous access, catheters and waste systems adding more care. These are part of keeping the passenger alive. Each added connection also gives infection, blockage, or equipment failure another way to enter the mission. Planned wake cycles make this harder. During each transition, the crew must check the lines and adjust the support as the person begins moving again. They must find out whether the passenger can swallow, digest food, and clear waste without help. Some equipment may have to come out before the person can work, then be fitted again before the next period of suppression. In a hospital, a nurse can replace a failed part or call another team into the room. On a spacecraft months from Earth, every sterile fitting must already be aboard, and the awake crew must handle the trouble themselves. One blocked tube may be manageable. 2 pods calling for help at once could force a choice about who gets attention first. The pod, therefore, does not remove care work. It concentrates that work around fewer, riskier moments and turns much of it into medical maintenance. Passengers may be asleep, but pumps wear down, filters fill, seals age, and waste keeps arriving. The clean pod bay starts to look less like a row of beds and more like a small care ward with no relief shift. Better sensors that do not enter the body could reduce some of this burden. Automated cleaning and feeding systems may help as well, but those methods do not erase the burden that current quasi-torpor plans must face. Someone still has to stock supplies, clear a blockage, trace a leak, and notice when a warm port may signal infection. Long suppression does not free the crew from care. It moves that care into repeated transitions, where several failures can demand attention together. If most of the crew is unavailable, who does that work when 2 pods need help at once? Perhaps, after enough practice, the waking cycles could settle into a dependable routine. A crew member wakes, gets cleaned and fed, completes a medical check, handles a few tasks, and then returns to torpor while someone else takes a turn through the same careful process. That could work, but it changes what the mission is doing. Each waking is a transition between 2 fragile states. Sedation has to ease, breathing, circulation, temperature, and awareness have to recover together, while the medical system watches for anything that fails to return on schedule. Then the person must become useful again, not merely conscious. They need to eat, move, think clearly, report symptoms, and help with work that accumulated during their absence. Later, the same process runs in reverse. Food and waste must be managed. Drugs must be measured. Sensors, lines, seals, and support equipment must be checked before another long period begins. Even with excellent automation, the machine cannot simply mark the patient as asleep and move on. Every cycle brings another chance for infection, blockage, poor circulation, a drug error, equipment failure, or a waking that takes longer than expected. This recurring care problem becomes clear when you follow the schedule across the full voyage. The burden is not confined to one medical emergency at departure and another at arrival. It returns with every planned waking, every unscheduled alarm, and every crew member who responds differently. Torpor reduces the time people spend awake, but it concentrates medical work around the moments when their bodies change state. A mission clock would show what this means. Its years would be filled with sedation windows, feeding periods, cleaning, examinations, physical recovery, equipment service, and extra time for the person who wakes confused or weak. If one cycle runs late, it can overlap the next. If two pods need intervention together, the crew and medical hardware must handle both without help from Earth. None of this proves that such a schedule could never be made reliable. Mature systems may turn many steps into practiced procedure, while better drugs, sensors, and robotics could lower the risk. But the procedure itself remains part of the flight. Nutrition, waste, circulation, and emergency readiness do not vanish during torpor. They return in timed waves. So the appealing word sleep no longer describes the whole arrangement. What the ship must sustain, year after year, is a medical cadence. And if we are already exposed during every transition, what happens when the danger is radiation, which never sleeps at all? A slower body can look like a safer body. If the crew is using less oxygen, producing less heat, and barely moving, it's tempting to think the dangers around them have also been turned down. That may be true for a few problems inside the pod. It is not true for the space around it. Radiation does not follow that setting. Far beyond Earth's protective magnetic field, a ship moves through a steady background of high-energy particles called galactic cosmic rays. They come from outside our solar system, cross enormous distances, and strike the vehicle whether its passengers are working, eating, dreaming, or lying under sedation. Nothing about consciousness changes the weather outside. NASA shielding workshops treat these cosmic rays as the persistent long-duration radiation problem in deep space. This differs from a sudden solar storm, which may arrive as an intense event and force the crew toward a better shielded shelter. Galactic cosmic rays are more patient. They remain part of the route itself, adding exposure across months, years, and perhaps much longer journeys. There may be no alarm or bright flash. The particles simply keep arriving. You can think of it less like a lightning strike, and more like fine rain during a very long drive. Closing your eyes may change how you experience the trip, but it doesn't stop drops from hitting the roof. In space, some particles strike the hull and lose energy there. Others pass through shielding or collide with its atoms, producing secondary particles that can continue into the cabin and into human tissue. That doesn't mean torpor has no possible role. Lower metabolism, altered cell activity, or carefully timed drugs might someday affect how the body responds to some radiation damage. Researchers can reasonably study torpor as one part of a larger defense, perhaps helping other protections work a little better. But that role remains limited and uncertain. It is nowhere close to replacing shielding, mission design, monitoring, or medical care. There is also no single dose that describes every interstellar ship. Exposure would depend on the route, travel time, hull materials, shielding layout, particle energies, and what happens when those particles strike the vehicle. A thicker wall is not automatically a complete answer, because collisions inside the shielding can create more particles with their own paths. The dependable point is simpler. The field persists, and every body aboard remains inside it. So torpor may change the passenger, but it does not switch off the environment. The ship keeps moving through invisible particle weather, accumulating a biological debt that sleep cannot cancel. If the background is always present, how could an interstellar vehicle shield its crew without becoming too massive to move? Long exposure makes radiation sound like a slow account, with each day adding a little more to the total. A solar storm changes the clock. It can send a dense burst of energetic particles toward the ship, turning a problem measured across months into one that may demand action before the crew could be safely brought back to full awareness. A NASA shielding workshop put the danger in direct terms. During an intense solar event, uncontrolled exposure could deliver a potentially lethal dose within a few to several hours. That does not mean every event would kill the crew, or that every ship would receive the same dose. The particles vary, and so do the route, hull, shelter, and warning time. but the response window is real and it can be painfully short. It is a little like hearing a fire alarm in a building where nearly everyone is under anesthesia. The alarm may arrive on time, and the protected room may be close by, but neither fact moves a sleeping person through the door. Someone, or something, must recognize the threat, decide what protection is needed, and act while the clock is still running. Waiting until the sleepers can wake, recover, understand the warning, and agree on a response could use up much of the time available. Torpor might someday help as one part of radiation care. Slower metabolism could change how the body handles some injuries, and future drugs or medical systems might add protection of their own. We do not yet know how much benefit that could provide during a real solar particle event. What Torpor cannot do is persuade incoming particles to wait. Quieter passengers do not buy extra hours from the sun. So the ship would need a storm shelter with enough shielding, plus sensors and systems able to protect sleepers immediately. Perhaps each pod would already sit inside the safest part of the vehicle. Perhaps automated machinery would move shielding, change the ship's orientation, or transfer crew members without waking them first. That machinery would need power, working sensors, and permission to act without a crew meeting. If human judgment were required, at least one person might need to remain available, which would change the whole crew schedule. The awkward result is that a sleeping ship cannot truly go to sleep. Its people may be unconscious, but its warning systems, power, thermal control, navigation, and medical authority must remain alert enough to handle a threat that arrives on its own timetable. And if the vehicle must stay awake for the entire crossing, who or what gets the authority to make those decisions while everyone else sleeps? Some animal studies point to an appealing idea. A body in torpor may react to radiation damage differently from one that is fully awake. A lower metabolism could change cell stress, inflammation, or the timing of repair. If so, a sleeping crew might gain some added protection during a long flight. That would be welcome, since every defense on a spacecraft has limits. The research is worth following, but it is still young. Reviews of synthetic torpor describe possible protection seen in animal studies. They also say we do not fully understand how it works. One tissue may respond differently from another. A benefit seen after one lab dose may also fade under the mixed and repeated exposure of deep space. So far, no human evidence shows that induced torpor can protect a crew for years. Even if stronger evidence arrives, the limit is plain. Torpor might change what happens inside the body after a high-energy particle passes through it. It does not stop that particle from entering the cabin. The hull must still deal with galactic cosmic rays throughout the voyage, and with sudden bursts from the sun. A slower body cannot turn those particles aside or absorb their energy before they strike living cells. The house image works well here. Dimming the lights is not the same as thickening the walls. Activity inside may fall, and that may someday help the people in the room cope with what gets through. But the walls have not changed by a millimeter. The crew still needs a storm shelter during a solar event, a way to manage the dose that builds over time, and enough material between them and the particle field. That does not make torpor research a dead end. A small biological benefit could sit beside physical shielding. It might reduce harm when particles get through, or help the body recover afterward. Space crews already depend on layers of protection that do different jobs. The hull can cut some of the dose. Biology may someday limit some damage, while medical care handles part of what remains. An extra layer can help without carrying the entire burden. The error would be treating an early effect, seen mainly in animals and still not fully explained, as something engineers can rely on now. Torpor may become a useful partner in radiation defense. It cannot become the wall itself. For now, the hull must do the main work whether the crew is awake, asleep, or somewhere between. And once those walls are thick enough to protect people for years, how much mass do they bring back into the mission? A sleeping crew still seems as though it should fit inside a smaller ship. The sleeping areas can be compact, food demand may fall, and many spaces built for daily life can shrink or vanish. Spaceworks studies found meaningful mass savings from changes like these, so the advantage is real. But once the voyage lasts far longer than a trip to Mars, some of that saved mass starts returning in a less welcome form. You can see the problem by taking a small cluster of sleep pods and wrapping it in a protective shell. Add enough material to reduce radiation exposure, then add structure to hold that material through launch and flight. The shell gets wider and heavier, a larger shell needs more support, and the growing vehicle can demand more propulsion, more fuel, or both. The sleepers have not become heavier, the spacecraft around them has. NASA shielding workshops have shown how severe this arithmetic can become. In some histories of shielding models, estimates rose above 50 grams of aluminium per square centimeter to bring exposure down toward limits associated with low Earth orbit. That is about 10 pounds of aluminium spread over every square foot of protected surface. Cover a crew compartment that way, and the protection bill becomes punishing very quickly. That figure is not a final design requirement. Radiation models change, mission routes differ, and aluminum may not be the best material. Hydrogen-rich materials, water, food, fuel, and waste can all be arranged to help absorb part of the dose. Engineers can also place the crew in a smaller protected area during periods of greater danger. The exact stack still remains unsettled. Yet, changing the stack does not remove the mass logic. Every layer has to go somewhere, and every kilogram must be launched, accelerated, slowed, and supported. Safety margins add more, because a crew cannot depend on a shield that works only under the most favorable forecast. Torpor trims the living burden, but it does not trim the years of exposure outside the hull. So the savings survive, just in reduced form. A sleeping passenger can be lighter than an awake passenger once food, space, and life support are counted. That passenger is not lighter than radiation physics. The dream of a tiny vessel becomes a small pod cluster inside a much larger protective body, with the arithmetic steadily building the ship back around the crew. If shielding consumes part of Torpor's advantage, can the remaining savings still justify the medical risk and engineering work? Perhaps part of that protective body can be built from things the crew already needs. A shelter doesn't have to be a separate vault filled with dead weight. Its walls might be lined with water bags, packed food, and other supplies arranged around the small space where people would wait during a solar storm. That works because materials rich in hydrogen are good at slowing the charged particles that make up much of space radiation. Hydrogen atoms are light, so an incoming particle is less likely to strike a heavy nucleus and produce a spray of secondary radiation. You can think of it as stopping a fast ball with layers of soft netting instead of letting it hit a metal plate. Shielding studies often favor polyethylene for the same reason. It contains a lot of hydrogen for its weight, and it can become part of walls, storage panels, or equipment housings. Water can serve the crew and protect them. Food stores can add cover. Even some waste may contribute once it has been safely contained and moved into the right position. This is good engineering, and it deserves full credit. Every pound that performs 2 jobs reduces the need for another pound that performs only 1. A water tank placed beside the crew shelter does more work than one tucked wherever it happens to fit. But we haven't made the mass disappear. The water still has to leave Earth, remain contained, and stay in the correct part of the ship. Food shielding becomes thinner as the food is eaten unless something replaces it. Waste changes form and location, so pumps, pipes, seals, and storage plans must prevent weak spots from opening. Polyethylene still has to be launched, inspected, and protected from damage throughout the flight. Layout brings compromises too. The best place for a tank as shielding may be a poor place for balance, access, cooling, or repair. A compact storm shelter can reduce exposure during a burst from the sun, yet years of lower background radiation affect the whole voyage. Protecting one small refuge is easier than giving every sleeping pod equal cover all the time. Integrated shielding can soften the mass bill, and Torpor can still save food, room, and life support load. Both savings are real. The problem is that the vessel still carries a bunker, even when that bunker is hidden inside water, dinner, walls, and yesterday's waste. Once we count those savings without making the same pounds vanish twice, how much advantage does Torpor actually have left? It is tempting to put the savings on one side of a balance sheet, the added mass on the other, and expect the totals to meet somewhere comfortable. Sleeping passengers need less food and cabin space, with less work from daily life support. You might expect those cuts to make the rest of the ship much easier to build. Some of that promise survives. Torpor can reduce parts of the crew burden, and good vehicle design can turn those cuts into real gains. But spacecraft accounting has an awkward habit. Saving mass in one system does not cancel a demand somewhere else. Radiation does not weaken because the people inside eat fewer meals, and a longer trip gives it more time to reach them. Cabin space removed in one column may return in another as protected sleeping space. Supplies no longer carried can free weight for shielding, but that shield needs a strong frame around it. Backup equipment also remains necessary. If a pump or power unit fails, sleeping passengers may be in danger before anyone can wake and respond. The figures move across the page, while the environment stays the same. That is the correction found in research on these designs. Torpor savings remain real, yet protection can consume a meaningful share of those gains across the vehicle. It is less like removing a spare bedroom from a house, and more like replacing that room with a reinforced shelter. The floor plan changes, and the heating bill may fall, but the building does not become light or easy to maintain. Different missions will produce different totals. A faster trip changes the radiation dose. Materials and accepted risk change the amount of shielding carried, so we cannot use one percentage for every design. The narrower conclusion is enough. Torpor savings and protection demands press against each other. We cannot count one as pure benefit, while the crew still has to survive the route. The finished craft may be smaller than one built for a fully active crew, yet it can remain large, heavy, and stubborn about where each part must go. Its passengers are quiet, but its machinery keeps running. Coolant still moves through pipes, filters slowly fill, and seals age. Electronics can fail without warning. None of that hardware repairs itself. Torpor may reduce what the crew consumes without reducing what the ship must endure. Once you put that difference on the balance sheet, sleeping through the voyage solves only half the problem. If most of the humans are unavailable, who keeps the ship functioning? Once the crew sleeps, the voyage may look like a long pause. The pods stay closed, the corridors remain empty, and the stars shift so slowly that the ship can seem almost parked. Yet thousands of small decisions are still being made behind the walls. A home can sit empty for a few weeks and still surprise you when you return. A pump may have begun to rattle. Damp may have formed beneath a sink, while the refrigerator makes a sound you don't remember. Nothing terrible happened. A few small faults simply had time to grow without anyone noticing. A starship faces that problem for decades, with no repair company down the road. Life support must keep the air safe, and sanitation equipment must keep working while the ship stays on course. Sensors must judge whether a strange reading comes from outside or from the sensor itself. These jobs are easier when a trained person can walk over, test a part, and notice that something doesn't feel right. Sleep removes most of those people from the room. The work falls to automated equipment, stored procedures, and whichever crew members can be awakened. That setup can handle expected faults well. A machine might isolate a damaged circuit, switch to a spare, record what happened, and carry on without disturbing anyone. Trouble comes when a fault doesn't match anything its designers prepared for. Machines can repeat known responses very well. They become less reliable when several weak signals disagree, especially if a repair requires someone to decide what can safely be shut down. Wake crew members too often, and the mission loses some benefit of putting them to sleep. Wake too few, and small repair jobs can pile up where the software may not detect them. Beneath the still pods, the ship remains a working settlement. Pumps cycle as computers compare readings, robotic tools inspect compartments, and spare parts wait for failures that may come years after anyone last checked them. Most days don't bring a crisis. They require steady care, because one missed fault can spread into several systems over time. That is the awkward trade. Human skill becomes hardest to reach at the same time the voyage depends on it most. A sleeping crew may be protected from the passing years, but its experience is sealed away with it. So how does the ship decide whom to wake? And when has a machine met a problem it cannot solve alone? Automation sounds like the clear answer once most of the crew is asleep. Give the ship capable software and machines that can watch and repair its vital systems, and it can guard the humans while they pass through the years unaware. Its control displays may look calm and simple, yet every stable reading rests on a vast amount of human work done long before launch. A machine can detect falling pressure because engineers decided what pressure should be and when a change calls for action. It can replace a valve because someone designed the tool, tested the repair, and placed the needed parts on board. The labor hasn't vanished. It has been packed into code and hardware, then backed by procedures and supplies. Strong automation deserves respect because it does far more than handle dull chores. It preserves decisions across time, allowing people who may be dead on Earth to guide a repair centuries later. The ship carries its builders with it through tested ways of finding trouble and responding before the damage spreads. But stored competence has needs of its own. Sensors drift, motors wear down, and software can face combinations its designers never tested. A repair robot can fix another machine only while its tools work and its guidance still fits the problem, with a suitable replacement part ready for use. Even a system that can rewrite its plans must decide whether the new plan is safer than the old one. Moving judgment into a computer changes where the work happens, but it doesn't remove the work. That becomes awkward when the crew is asleep, because competence is hardest to reach at the exact time the ship may need an immediate response. Waking someone could take time and carry medical costs, while choosing the wrong person might add little. If the system waits too long, one local fault could spread into other systems. It therefore needs some way to recognize its limits and admit when a situation no longer matches what it was built to understand. None of this makes deep autonomy impossible. It makes autonomy another massive requirement, durable skill preserved across centuries, along with the machinery and supplies needed to keep that skill working. We would still be sending a civilization between the stars, though part of it would live in silicon and manuals rather than in waking minds. And if that stored civilization meets a problem beyond its experience, who should be brought back into the room? If the ship can spot a fault and wake the right specialist, authority may seem like paperwork we could leave on Earth. Yet the control room needs an answer before anyone opens their eyes. Who may interrupt the voyage, and when? A fire alarm in an empty office can call the fire department, but a starship has no fire department nearby. Its procedures must judge a strange reading and decide whether a failing system deserves scarce power. They must weigh the risk of waking one person against the risk of waking several more. Those choices involve engineering, but also authority, because somebody, or some agreed chain of command, has to own the result. Torpor makes that chain more important because it leaves fewer skilled people available. With nearly everyone asleep, a lone watchkeeper may be the only human able to challenge the machine's diagnosis. With no one awake, the wake rules become a temporary command structure. They decide whose knowledge enters the room first, and who can overrule the machine if the chosen specialist cannot help. That is why the ship carries more than repair instructions. It needs a clear transfer of control after an injury or failed awakening, along with limits on what the automation may do alone. Records from earlier decisions help the next person understand how the ship reached its present state. The aim isn't to design a large government for sleeping passengers. It is to stop a damaged sensor or disputed diagnosis from becoming a fight with no accepted decision-maker. A voyage lasting decades may meet conditions its designers never expected, and the original plan may no longer offer the safest path. A target system could prove unsafe. The ship might have to choose between protecting the sleepers and saving enough fuel to arrive. Software can compare the options, but it cannot decide which losses the mission may accept. That choice still belongs to people. So even a calm control room contains a small, awake civilization. Responsibility rests in its access codes, wake orders, and lines of succession long before an emergency arrives. There is a slightly absurd human detail here. Thousands of sleeping people might depend on a clause written generations earlier by someone who never saw the problem. Torpor reduces the number of available hands while leaving the need for judgment firmly in place. If other mission designs begin with more people awake, or with no sleeping crew at all, how differently do they carry that burden? Generation ships can sound like the slower, older cousin of Torpor. Take the same vessel, leave everyone awake, and accept that the trip will span many lifetimes. But once you do that, the mission changes shape. The ship is no longer carrying a civilization in storage, it is a civilization. That choice answers the problem of time by living through it. Children are born on board, grow up, learn how the ship works, and eventually take responsibility for people they will never meet on Earth. Knowledge must pass from one generation to the next, along with skills, laws, family ties, and some shared reason to keep going. The long voyage is not an interval placed between departure and arrival. For most passengers, it is the whole world they will know. You can see the difference in the ship itself. A Torpor vessel may be designed around protected chambers and a small support system. An awake generation ship would look more like a moving settlement, with homes, schools, clinics, workshops, food production, and places where people make decisions together. Maintenance would not sit behind the mission as a technical service. Teaching someone to repair an air pump, settle a dispute, or raise a child would all be part of keeping the vessel alive. This does not make the generation ship an easy answer. It openly accepts the burden that Torpor tries to reduce. A living population consumes more resources, produces more conflict, and needs room to change without losing the ability to operate the machines beneath its feet. The people who arrive may have no memory of Earth beyond records and stories, while the people who chose the destination will have been dead for centuries. Still, the design has a certain clarity. It does not pretend civilization can be paused while machinery carries human bodies across the dark. It brings social continuity on board and treats it as part of the payload. Torpor asks a small awake group to guard a sleeping population. A generation ship spreads that duty across a society, then trusts that society to renew itself. Other proposals avoid both choices by changing who travels, when they wake, or whether an adult crew leaves Earth at all. If the mission no longer begins with a complete human community, what exactly must the ship carry so that one can exist at the other end? Cryonics can seem like Torpor taken one step further. If slowing the body saves energy, then freezing it might appear to save even more. But the difference is closer to keeping a house running through winter versus taking it apart, storing every piece, and trusting someone in the future to rebuild it. You have not improved the heating system, you have changed the entire plan. Torpor keeps a person alive as a working biological system. The heart still beats, cells still use energy, and the crew must control temperature, fluids, nutrition, waste, infection, and muscle loss. Whole body cryopreservation makes another kind of bet. It tries to preserve enough physical structure that a future society could repair the damage and restore the person later. That preserved traveler is not waiting for a routine wake-up call. They may need damaged cells repaired, toxic preserving chemicals removed, tissues restored after cooling, and any harm caused by the condition that killed them in the first place. Even if the brain's fine structure remained in some meaningful form, no one has shown that a cryopreserved human can be revived with memory, identity, and healthy function intact. A major review of cryonics research draws the line clearly. There is real scientific work behind low-temperature preservation, especially with cells, embryos, and some small tissues. Yet there is still no demonstrated route from whole human cryopreservation to whole human revival. That does not prove future medicine could never do it. It means the evidence we have now cannot support cryonics as a near-term crew system. And that changes the mission far more than it changes the thermostat. Torpor pays continuously with machines and awake people caring for living bodies during the flight. Cryonics tries to delay much of that cost, then hand it to a repair civilization equipped with technologies that do not exist yet. The ship could arrive carrying preserved people, but the destination would need the medicine, knowledge, equipment, energy, and social commitment to reconstruct them. Someone there must also decide that this difficult repair still deserves to be done. So cryonics belongs in the discussion, though it is not Torpor with the setting turned down. It is a different expedition built around a deeper biological wager. If we cannot safely carry sleeping adults and cannot count on rebuilding frozen ones, could a ship carry human life in an earlier and far more adaptable form? An embryo ship seems at first like a smaller version of the same plan. Instead of keeping adults alive and asleep for decades, the vessel carries embryos, machines, and the means to begin human life after arrival. The destination stays the same, but the passenger has changed so completely that the mission is no longer solving the same problem. A sleeping adult brings memories, relationships, rights, skills, and a life already underway. An embryo brings the possibility of a person. It cannot repair the ship, consent to the voyage, or raise itself when the crossing ends. Machines would have to protect the embryos, build a safe home, manage birth, and then care for children with no adult human community waiting to receive them. That may reduce some demands during the flight, but it creates a new set of duties at the destination. It also changes what human continuity means. The people who chose the mission would never reach the new world. Their descendants would, raised by robotic systems and shaped by a place their parents had never seen. Calling those embryos passengers feels slightly awkward, because they would spend the crossing as stored biological material and become travelers only after the ship had arrived. Robotic precursor missions make a different trade. A machine can leave first, study the target world, test local resources, build shelters, or send better measurements home. It might prepare a landing site for people who follow, or it might become the entire mission, extending human knowledge without carrying humans at all. In that case, arrival means the instruments work and the data returns, not that a human being steps outside. Research comparing these concepts treats them as separate mission classes because each solves a different human problem. Torpor tries to preserve an adult crew while reducing the burden of keeping them awake. Embryo concepts move human development to the far end of the trip. Robotic precursors remove human bodies from the crossing, perhaps from the whole expedition. None is simply a better sleep setting. They may all have a place in interstellar exploration, and none has earned an easy endorsement. The shared destination can hide the difference. One mission delivers people who left Earth, another begins new people after arrival, and another delivers only our machines. Before choosing how a ship should travel, then, what exactly are we asking it to carry? The menu of interstellar ideas can look like a shelf of replacement parts. Choose Torpor instead of a rotating habitat, embryos instead of sleeping adults, or robots instead of either. And it may seem that we're still building the same ship. We aren't. The destination may stay fixed, but the passengers and the meaning of arrival have changed. A generation ship accepts that a society must stay awake for the whole crossing. Children are born, adults age, and leaders are replaced. The ship becomes a lived-in world where machines, skills, and customs must survive together. That means producing food, shielding people from radiation, teaching children, settling disputes, and keeping the population healthy. The human burden isn't removed, it's spread across many lifetimes, with each new generation asked to maintain a mission chosen long before they were born. Torpor takes a narrower route. It tries to preserve the adults who left Earth while reducing their need for food, space, movement, and daily support during parts of the voyage. If fewer people need full living quarters or constant care, some demands on the ship may shrink, but their bodies are still aboard. Radiation can still reach them, and failed equipment can still kill them. Someone, or some machine, must watch their health, protect them, wake them safely, and respond when a pump fails at the worst possible time. Most of the crew may be asleep, but the work of keeping them alive remains awake. Embryo missions move the load much further. They don't carry a working adult society through space. Instead, they depend on stored biology and machines that can bring children into the world after arrival, then care for them and teach them. Adult bodies are gone from the crossing, but questions about development, culture, and consent appear at the destination. A robotic precursor may carry no human biology at all. It can test local conditions, prepare a site, or build equipment, while leaving any later human trip unsolved. The research groups these proposals into separate mission classes because they preserve different things. One preserves an awake society. Torpor tries to preserve existing adults while lowering their active needs. The others pass the task to machines, embryos, or future people. Each cuts one burden by placing another burden somewhere else, so no single plan wins for every goal. Once the shelf labels are fixed, what does Torpor truly buy in its narrower lane, and which debts remain unpaid? After all those limits, it would be easy to dismiss Torpor as a clever idea that belongs in fiction. That would miss what it can really do. Lowering a crew member's metabolism for long periods could remove a real share of the pressure from some deep space missions, especially when the travelers remain within reach of support. A traveler in Torpor may need less food and water than someone who stays awake throughout the trip. Carrying fewer supplies could lower the mass at launch. The habitat might also be smaller, because sleeping travelers need less space for daily life. On a spacecraft, even a modest saving can change the whole design. There may be a human benefit as well. A voyage lasting many months could feel like several shorter waking periods instead of one long confinement. That might ease some of the mental strain caused by boredom or limited privacy. We don't yet know how much relief Torpor would provide, but the reason for studying it is sound. The fairest comparison is a bill with one real slice removed. The total is lower, and that could make a hard mission easier to build, but the remaining charges haven't vanished. Torpor may offer a meaningful discount without paying for the entire spacecraft. Even with its crew asleep, the craft must keep them alive and protected from radiation. Its medical systems must detect trouble before a sleeping traveler can explain what hurts, while the power supply keeps working behind it all. If fewer people are awake, the spacecraft must handle more problems by itself until someone can be brought back. The travelers' bodies create another limit because long periods with little movement may cause harm. Any damage must remain smaller than the benefit of lowering metabolism, and that balance is still uncertain. Torpor helps only if people wake able to live and work. The boundary becomes firmer when a voyage lasts for decades, centuries, or longer. Radiation keeps building, while critical machines age far beyond the time spans we have tested. A failure could occur after the designers are gone, with Earth too distant to send a replacement part or rescue crew. Lower metabolism cannot settle those debts. So Torpor isn't fake, and it doesn't deserve ridicule. Within bounded deep space missions, it may reduce awake time and supply needs. It could also ease habitat pressure and some of the strain from confinement. Those gains are real. But once the distance between stars defines the mission, time becomes the larger burden. Human bodies still need protection, and machines must endure without rescue. Torpor can lower part of the bill. It cannot make the bill disappear. A sleeping pod can look like the center of an interstellar ship because it holds the people. Step back, though, and the rest of the vessel has barely changed. Its engines must still push the hull between stars, and its equipment must keep working after Earth is too far away to help. Better Torpor could reduce food use, cabin space, and the time people spend awake. Those gains are real, but they don't reach far into the ship. A smaller living area still needs shielding, and less food doesn't shorten the route. Sleeping longer also leaves the body open to medical trouble during torpor and the difficult return to full strength. That wake cycle may be the most awkward part. A crew member can't open their eyes and become a surgeon or engineer at once. Someone must watch the process and recognize when a body is failing, while the medical system provides treatment. There must also be a way to decide whether another person should be woken early. If that equipment breaks, the pod can't climb out and repair it. Hardware wears down while no one is watching. Software will meet faults its designers never tested, and a repair may consume a scarce part or cause trouble somewhere else. Some choices will carry consequences that no delayed message from Earth can settle. The ship needs enough judgment to find damage and change its plans so it can keep functioning without outside control. So we still have to send something close to an awake civilization, folded into hardware and procedure. It needs people or systems able to provide care, make repairs, and hold a working form of authority when the original plan no longer fits events. The people in the pods may be quiet. Everything supporting them must remain alert. This is the boundary that future improvements keep reaching. Torpor can thin one visible layer of the mission, while the decades-long route remains unchanged. Protection still has to surround the crew. Care has to be ready when they wake. Meanwhile, the ship must survive its own aging and make decisions beyond rescue. The research doesn't expose one fatal flaw, and it doesn't make Torpor a fantasy. It shows that each apparent solution leaves another debt unpaid. Changing that verdict would take more than a safer pod. Several breakthroughs would have to work together for decades, with little room for error and no nearby rescue. Until that whole stack changes, Torpor remains a powerful tool carried by an interstellar ship. It isn't the thing that makes the ship possible. The easy ending would blame one missing medical invention. Teach the human body to enter a deep, controlled sleep and wake without lasting harm, and perhaps the voyage falls into place around it. That would be a wonderfully compact problem, but it would also be the wrong size. A sleeping crew can use less food and living space. They may also avoid some of the strain that comes from spending years awake inside a sealed ship. Once the destination lies between the stars, though, those savings become one small part of a far larger machine. The ship still has to cross an immense distance before its parts wear out. Along the way, radiation and impacts keep coming, and any failed part must be found and repaired without quick help from Earth. So the breakthrough cannot arrive as one clever pod. It needs several advances that support one another, like blocks bearing the same weight. More credible propulsion could shorten the crew's exposure. Shielding would also have to become more affordable without adding so much mass that the ship becomes harder to move. Torpor itself would need to remain reversible after years, perhaps decades. The sleeping body could not slowly lose the brain function, muscle, immunity, or general health that a person needs after waking. A pulse at the destination is a very low standard for success. While the crew sleeps, the ship must inspect damage and respond to failures its designers never met during testing. It would need enough freedom to adapt, but not so much that its own decisions become another danger. And when the passengers wake, they must still be able to think and cooperate. They may need to work, build a life, or raise children if the mission calls for it. The goal is preserved human function, not merely living tissue. None of this means people will never sleep through parts of deep space travel. Shorter torpor may become medically real and genuinely helpful, and the evidence leaves room for that future. It does not support asking sleep to carry the full weight of an interstellar voyage. That answer could change, but reality would have to change across several fields at once. Propulsion may improve sharply, better materials may reduce the cost of shielding, medicine may learn to suppress and fully restore the body, and autonomous ships may become far more capable of caring for themselves. Those gains must mature together because one weak layer can still bring down everything above it. The missing answer is a stack, not a single miracle. The sleeping passenger was only ever one part of the spacecraft, and now we can see the whole ship around them. The person in the pod looks peaceful because almost everything difficult has moved out of sight. There may be no meal to prepare, no lonely afternoon to fill, and fewer waking hours in which supplies are used, but the pod is still inside a vessel crossing space, and that vessel cannot sleep with its passenger. Torpor could someday make parts of deep space travel easier. It might reduce wake time, lower the need for some food and water, and spare a crew from living through every slow month of a long flight. It may also ease some of the strain of confinement. Those are real benefits, even if they fall far short of the image we began with. The sleeping body still needs medicine, monitoring, stable temperature, clean air, and protection from radiation. Muscles and bones may weaken while the traveler lies still. A small infection may become serious before anyone notices. Drugs can behave differently over long periods, and no one has shown that healthy humans can enter deep torpor for years and wake without lasting harm. We don't know how to make that process perfectly reversible. Around the sleeper, the mission keeps moving. Shielding must survive damage from radiation and tiny impacts. Pumps, seals, sensors and computers must keep working long after their makers are gone. Something must notice a slow leak, decide whether a repair can wait, and choose what to sacrifice when two failures arrive together. Instructions can cover expected trouble. They cannot cover every possible combination of trouble, especially across decades when replacement parts may be limited and help from Earth may take years to arrive. And that is why one sleeping passenger cannot stand in for a sleeping mission. Even with every person inside a pod, the ship would still carry a kind of awake civilization, medical knowledge, repair skills, rules, spare parts, and the authority to make choices. We can place some of that in software and machines, but we haven't proved that an autonomous vessel could protect human lives across an interstellar voyage with no capable crew awake to help it. And time remains. Torpor doesn't shorten the distance or provide the speed needed to cross it. It doesn't stop radiation from reaching the hull, prevent equipment from aging, or guarantee that the destination will still be safe when the passengers arrive. Sleep may change how the years feel to a traveler. It does not remove those years from the ship, or spare the ship from carrying every risk that comes with them. So can humans hibernate through interstellar travel? Torpor may one day help us through parts of a deep space voyage, and future medicine may keep a body stable far longer than we can today. But it cannot yet carry people through the full burden of a voyage between stars. A different answer would require several advances to arrive together. Propulsion that cuts the travel time, reliable protection from radiation, torpor that can be reversed after very long periods, and machines able to care for both ship and crew when no human can step in. None of those solutions is settled. Better sleep alone is not enough. The first sleeper remains where we left them, breathing slowly inside the pod. Nothing dramatic needs to happen in that room. The harder work belongs to the vessel around them, which must keep the air clean, the walls intact, and its choices sound while preserving a small human world whose people cannot help. The passenger may sleep, the civilization carrying them cannot.